Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inna alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-anbiya wa mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabauhum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din wa ba'd. Welcome once again, Sunday, 3 p.m. or thereabouts, and we are back once again with our reading and discussion from the book Saeed al-Khawatir, from the Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, rahmatullahi alayhi, the great Hanbali jurist of about 9 centuries ago. We are continuing in the chapter in which we were in yesterday, which is the wisdom and etiquette of marriage. This is part 2. This may or may not be the final part. This section, as I had indicated yesterday, is long. So we'll pick up where we left off, inshallah, and we'll continue for as long as seems reasonable, trying to keep it not too overburdening, and we'll begin from there. So Ibn al-Jawzi, rahmatullahi alayhi, we're going to back up just slightly, the one paragraph before where we stopped yesterday. Ibn al-Jawzi, he said that this is because the idea of desiring the new, he'd been referring to the latent desire in people that they're constantly looking for that which is new, that which is different than what they have become accustomed to, grown accustomed to. The idea of desiring the new is eye-inspiring, where the self is not attracted to what it is used to, but rather seeks what it has not experienced, assuming a new joy will be gained from it. And if the self does not receive the pleasure it is after from the new object, it will search for it in another object, assuming that such pure pleasure exists elsewhere. And that is something it imagines in every newly sought object. So this is, as we had said yesterday, a slightly long-winded way of saying what we would say in the West as that the grass is always greener on the other side. So this constantly looking for that which is perceived to be, and that is a key, perceived to be new and better. And the reality is that each time you go to the next, you find that you're not satisfied. And even there, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of something I didn't think of yesterday, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said what means that if the son of Adam had a valley of gold, he would desire another, and that nothing will fill the belly of the son of Adam except for dust, meaning except his grave. In other words, he will never be truly satisfied until he is dead, and gone. And the end of worldly desire comes to a close, that this is the only time that it will be ended. It will constantly be looking for the next best thing. And again, the next best perceived thing. It is a perception. It is not necessarily reality. So he continues from here. He says, in the paradigm of this understanding, there is hidden evidence. This is where he gets into a really, really good, important point. In this paradigm of this understanding, there is hidden evidence on the existence of resurrection, because to create humans with endeavors and desires to attain the ultimate pleasure, though such pleasure does not exist in this life, will be futile and in vain. Thus heed this meaning. So he's saying that this constant pursuit for what is best, what is better than what we have, it's constantly looking for the penultimate experience, if you will, that this is, in his argument here, is evidence of the resurrection, in that that the necessity of being brought back to life to exist in the Aakhirah is indicated by this desire, because, and this alludes to a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hinting at this reality somewhat, where he says, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir," that this dunya, this life, this world is a prison for the believer and paradise for the disbeliever. The believer who understands that there is an afterlife realizes that this dunya is a prison, because no matter how much he may feel want and desire to attain to something better than what he has, than his station in this life, he knows that in this life he will never truly attain that desire. Whereas the disbeliever sees nothing but this world. sees nothing but this life. His vision only extends, as they say, to the tip of his nose. He can't see beyond the tip of his nose. And so everything that is near, as he alluded to in another chapter, where he says the tangible, the evident, that is all that he could see. What he can see and hear and taste and touch, that is all that is of importance to him, etc. And the believer extends his hopes and his aspirations to the unseen. And thereby, that is what drives him to work towards that unseen, because he realizes that that perfection that he seeks, that penultimate experience that he seeks or she seeks, is in the next life and is not in this life. So ad-dunya, this worldly life, this temporal passing enjoyment, is a prison to the believer. Genital kafir, and paradise, a garden from the gardens of paradise for the disbeliever. May Allah guide us to what is true. So he continues, so long the self finds defects and flaws of what it experiences in this worldly life, it will keep searching for the ideally perfect new. On this account, wise men have said aforetime, extreme love is to be too blind to see the shortcomings and defects of the one you love. So to use this saying to say that extreme love is to be too blind to see the shortcomings and defects of the one you love. So in other words, if we become too overwhelmed with dunya, too overwhelmed with worldly existence and pursuits of temporal and contingent pleasures, we lose the ability to see the defects. We lose the ability to see the dirt, if you will, that's on the dream that is this worldly life, this worldly existence. So the extreme love is to be too blind to the shortcomings and defects of the one you love, and whoever busies himself with his own flaws will find no time to find flaws in others. In other words, rather than focusing on how this one or that one, this thing or that thing has failed to meet your expectations, the wise man, the wise woman busies themselves with their shortcomings, with how they are falling short, with how they are not living up to the expectations and the goals and the aspirations that they should have for themselves, and leaving aside the concern for the others and focusing on themselves, that this is the road to success. And that you'll be too busy. If you do that, you'll be too busy to busy yourself with the flaws and defects of others and other things. And even we've spoken about something similar to this when talking about Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin by Ibn Qudama, rahmatullahi alayh, where he talks about this, that for argument's sake, let's say, for instance, that you are assured of yourself, you're so convinced of your own excellence that you believe that you are without defect, that you are without sin even. And so therefore you don't see anything inside of yourself. When you look inside, you don't see anything inside. You don't see any defects inside. And so rather than deviating from that to then busy yourself with the flaws of others, then he says, Ibn Qudama in his writings, he says, if this is true, and he alludes to the fact that this is nearly impossible to be true in the first place, but if we assume that this is true, that you are without flaws and defects yourself, then rather than busy yourself with someone else, you should busy yourself with being grateful and showing gratitude and practicing proper gratefulness for what you've been given. That this is the way you should respond, rather than deviating from yourself to busy yourself with the flaws and defects of others, which you can't have complete knowledge of in the first place. Allah is Al-Alim, Al-Khabir. He is the one who has the full knowledge of his slaves. And so he knows their conditions, their true conditions. And they may have, in his wisdom and his sight, circumstances and conditions and, if you will, alibis that make their situation completely different than what it might look like to us. And so we have to be mindful of those things, etc. But he says, if you are in that condition where you have no defects, as unlikely and nearly impossible as that might be, then you should busy yourself with showing gratitude and appreciation for being in that condition rather than busying yourself with others. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so he continues, for this reason, it is liked for the wife to neither keep her husband away from her to the point that he forgets her, nor to draw him too close to her to the point that he becomes bored with her. So in other words, this is advising a moderation in the time that we spend with our spouses. It's being addressed to the wives, but it's equally applicable to both spouses, because both of them are involved and both of them are engaged in this relationship. So he's saying, speaking to the wife, but extending this generally to say that you don't want to become too attached, too engaged with one another to the point that you become bored with one another, and you don't want to stay away from each other. You don't want to remain distant and cool or cold towards one another to the point that they become bored, or to the point that they lose interest. You need to maintain a certain balance in that. So as he said, that neither keep herself from her husband so to the point that he forgets her, nor draw him too close so that he becomes bored with her. He continues saying that the same applies to the husband too, so that he does not become tired with her or know the details of her defects. Love spending too much time with her, you start to nitpick the little things. You begin to lose appreciation for the subtleties and the qualities of your spouse to the point that you become, you know, hypercritical, if you will. You begin to point out the slightest blemish or defect, whether physical or characterological. You start to do those things. You know her defects. Moreover, the wife should endeavor that her husband does not see her private parts except occasionally to ensure to smell good for him. So to not be overly exposed so that he becomes bored with her beauty, with the beauty of her when she is exposed, as she would be in that time, in the time of intimacy. So to not to be so exposed that he becomes bored with the appearance, and it doesn't elicit in him the response that she would like to have. So, and he continues to ensure to smell good for him when he is around her, and to ensure to do all similar acts that wise women do, and to impress, attract, and keep their men attentive. So he is alluding to the, if you will, the womanly wiles. And I know that phrase in Western context is not very much appreciated, but there's various writings of the scholars of the past that allude to this idea that there is a strength, there is a power in the womanly wiles, if you will. Is that this is the way that women have a certain power, a certain advantage over men, or they can wield an advantage over men, and the wise woman understands that power and that advantage and uses it in a way that is beneficial, and doesn't seek to take advantage, doesn't seek to go beyond bounds, but doesn't ignore that power at the same time and pretend that it doesn't exist. It is there. It is a valuable commodity that she has been given by Allah, and that is something that can do wonders at maintaining the relationship. Men, speaking at least for myself, men's hearts can be very, very receptive to the gentleness of a woman, and the gentleness of spirit, the gentleness of character and of approach can be very effective on melting a man's resolve and his heart, and making him inclined to compassion and to mercy with her and with the family at large. And Allah knows best. So he says, women are naturally aware of such methods and practices and do not need to receive any advice or education about it. Now, again, keep in mind when he's writing 9 centuries ago, and he's saying that women generally, they already know all of these things. That may have been true 9 centuries ago. I would argue that given modern day circumstances and some of the dialogue that takes place, I believe some of those arts have been lost, and some of the appreciation of their true value and power has been forgotten. And so there is a need to educate. There is a need to instruct in those things, and to find reliable, faithful, trustworthy women who can educate the new generation about those things, and for men as well to understand it and to not, again, take advantage of it, because men can try and take advantage of these things in as much as women may take advantage of them. So he continues, as for the ignorant women who do not pay attention to these details, their husbands in not much time will start seeking other women and turn away from them. So in other words, if you don't seek to maintain the interest of your husband, if you don't seek to remain alluring or enticing to your husband in various ways, then you will lose it. He will quickly lose interest and he may turn away. And so this is a cautionary tale to the wives in particular. They have a great power in retaining their husbands' affections. If they fear losing them, they have as much power as anyone else does in maintaining those affections. And this isn't to say that it requires doing things that are unbecoming of a believing woman or anything like that, etc. But these are things that between spouses, between husband and wife, are completely permissible and completely allowable. These are tools that have been given to generate, as Allah alludes to in the Quran, that He has placed between you mawadda and rahmah. He's placed between you affection and mercy. And so affection is a road to the mercy. So having that affectionate nature, and this applies equally to both spouses, but the woman has a special power in this regard that the man may not have. So the mawadda, the affection, leads to the rahmah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So he continues, if a person desires to have an intelligent and healthy child and at the same time enjoy himself, he should carefully select the female he allows himself to have intimate relation with. So in other words, be judicious in the choice of your partner. If he is after a wife, he should look at her, and if he feels that there's chemistry between them, then he can proceed with marriage. In other words, this alludes to the fact that the looking at the spouse is something that's very, very important, and that having chemistry, as he alludes to here, at least the way it's been translated, is a critical part of the decision to proceed forward. That there should be some chemistry, there should be some attraction. You don't want to marry yourself to someone that you find repugnant for some reason or another, for one, whether physical or characterological. It can be for either reason. And it continues, not only that he should find out the effect she will have on him, because the sign of ultimate love is that he is not able to take his eyes away from her, and that whenever she is away from his sight, his heart becomes troubled and distressed until he sees her again. That is the pinnacle level of love. There are many levels below this too. Each level brings forth different results and effects. So here, yes, subhanAllah, this is important. And many families, they may not see this, and many times the youth, they complain that they're expected to to enter into a marriage bond without there being any love. And here he's alluding to the idea of the things that she should be looking for. He's like, she should find out the effect that she will have on him. The signs of ultimate love is that he is not able to take his eyes away from her, and that when she is away, he can't stop thinking about her, and his heart feels disturbed. So this is that, you see a woman and you can't take your eyes off of her. You're just transfixed by her. And I know many times people, they hear that and they think, oh, it's completely physical, it's completely sexual. It's not necessarily completely sexual. Sometimes someone can capture your attention in a way that transcends sexual thought and feeling. There's just something innate in the nature of the quality of that person that speaks to you, and you connect to it, etc. So he says that you can't turn your eyes away from her, and then when she is away from you, you can't stop thinking about her. Your heart is constantly at dis-ease. It's perturbed, and you keep thinking about her until you see her again. So that this is very important. He says this, until he sees again. That is the pinnacle level of love, is what he says, the pinnacle level of love. So he continues, if he is after buying a female concubine, then he should look more than he would look normally. And if one is able to speak with the woman he intends to marry, or encourage her to talk so that he has an idea of how she converses, he should do so, and then look at her face, for the beauty of the woman lies in the eyes and the mouth. So the important part here, some of it is not really applicable anymore regarding the concubines and things like that. But he says, if you are able to speak with the woman he intends to marry, or encourage her to talk so that he has an idea of how she converses. In other words, it's not just about the beauty. is getting, talking to her, getting her to converse with him, so they have an exchange, they have a dialogue, so he gets to understand how is it that she engages, how is it that she reasons, and she talks and goes back and forth in these sorts of contexts and conversations. He says this is important. And then you should also, he says again, look at her face, for the beauty of the woman lies in the eyes and in the mouth. So he's encouraged to look at the face. So even, and you have to understand here, this is a humbly jurist that's writing this, and the humbly jurists are at the very least very, very strongly encourage a woman to wear a veil. Yet and still, he's saying that it's very important for him to look at her eyes and her mouth, that these are where the beauty really lies, is in the eyes and the mouth. And so you look at the face when you're talking to her. So this is critically important, this idea of looking at the spouse and how critical it really is. And then he relates from Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, rahmatullahi alayh, that he stated that it is permissible for a man proposing to a woman to see of her more than her face. So more than just her face, it would be permissible. And there's different opinions from Imam Ahmed and from the other madhahib, etc. Some of them, they go very far. Some of them, they're very, very restrictive. But even more than the face, whether it's the forearms, the legs, to the legs to a certain extent, etc. But that it's more than just the face. Is that enough to see? And the way the ayah says is enough to make him feel attracted to her, to feel whatever. And there's extremes that people go to about that. He continues, having said that, it is better if a person can wait for some time before finalizing the marriage or buying the female slave, in order to test the longing of his heart. Pay attention. It's better to wait for a period of time in order to test the longing of your heart for her, because as every intelligent person knows, the self longs and yearns for a matter, either because it is untried or because of love. So remember, he was talking about the desire for the new, and that, wait some time to test that, to see, are you only interested because this is the next best thing, this is the latest and greatest, model, that's come across your radar. And so, your interest is because it's new, it's unexpected, etc. And that with time, the interest may wane, because you become familiar, because it becomes more common in your sight or in your estimation, and so you lose interest. Or with time, does it become nearer and dearer to you? Then this is that sign of love that he's alluding to. It's either because of it being new or because of love. And so if you delay for a while, testing the waters, so to speak, to see, will the shine fade, or will it continue to burn brightly and brilliantly? If it continues to burn brightly and brilliantly, that is a sign that this is because of love and not because of novelty. If it was the latter, in other words, if it was love, he should proceed so long as he is sure that his yearning for her is because of his love. In other words, that it's love, the love, the righteous spiritual love, for someone, out of, again, mawadda and rahma, affection and mercy and things like that, and looking litaskunu alayha, in order that you find tranquility with her in creating a household together, etc. That this is the reason, not that, as Allah alludes to in the Quran, that you're taking them for lovers or girlfriends or boyfriends. That not for those reasons, but that you're seeking to establish a righteous household, and that is the motivation, and is being done out of those qualities of affection and mercy, that there's love, mawadda, between them. And so if you feel that, and if you're certain that that's what it is, and it's not something more base, then you should proceed. So love in what he's writing here is absolutely paramount, actually, in the process of marriage, that should be there. If there aren't the butterflies, then perhaps, it's not really, something that you should pursue, because it could be something that, doesn't hold the strength to last, or at least not to be a bond of happiness for you. So he continues writing that Ata al-Khurasani said, it is written in the Torah that marriage without love is a regret and misery until the day of judgment. Yes, subhanAllah. So this is, obviously, this is Israeliyat. This is the tales from the people of the book, the children of Israel. But here he's relating a statement from the children of Israel, the people of the book, doesn't necessarily contradict anything we have in our deen. So we can take wisdom from it. Because as the Prophet ﷺ had said, that wisdom is the lost found treasure of the believer. They take it from wherever they find it. You know, or kama qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here they're saying it is written in the Torah, yani fil Torah, that marriage without love is a regret and misery until the day of judgment. So here again, this stress on the idea of having love and affection in a marriage is there. It's not as sometimes the uncles and aunties from back home will say, you know, that, you know, it's this process. I remember one of my teachers, he made a big point of saying that he hadn't even seen the face of his bride until the day of the wedding. That was the first time he ever saw her. And so everything was being handled. So, you know, it was, but of course, this was the way things were done back then. And people went into these marriages, you know, with little to no information about one another in many respects, especially in terms of the actual bond and connection that they might have. And so, you know, this was the way of the world at that time. And inshallah, we won't carry on much longer. Let me just read this. Actually, we'll stop there because it goes into a new point, and we want to go ahead and stop here so that we can carry on into that new point. Like I said, it is longer. So inshallah, we'll actually be continuing this next week, where we'll start to talk about the second step in investigating the proposed spouse. Inshallah. With that, I'd like to thank you for being here again. I want to remind everyone that I do offer a service as an advisor for couples based on education I have in Gottman method couples therapy, as well as my Islamic education as well, and my own personal experience, you know, with matters of family and relationships. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to email us at outreach@irvingmasjid.org and make it attention to Imam Saeed, and we can arrange something, inshallah ta'ala. جزاكم الله خير سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.